element overview. Here we'll take a closer look at the list of all the elements in your DataMiner system. And it also includes things like services, SLAs, redundancy groups, etc. And we'll also discover some of the remaining pages that I still wanted to show you. Let's take a look at that. So the element overview, we are mainly going to focus on the data pages of a view card, because that's basically where we can find the list of elements in my DataMiner system. So we open up a view card, you have the visual, and you have the below this view, the data pages containing all the elements of my DataMiner system. And I'll briefly show you some of the other pages that I wanted to showcase as well. Next to that, we'll touch upon the element states, the element icons, the quick filter we have again available, some other small features that we have in that list of elements, and we'll wrap it up with the element set. So first of all, that's those data pages. So they are called below this view on a view card. So basically you open up a view card. In this case, we have opened the roots of my DataMiner system. So the top level view in your tree structure. This means that it basically contains my complete DataMiner system. And if I go to all or elements or services or SLAs, it will show everything of my DataMiner system. All the elements, all the services, all the SLAs, etc. You can, of course, also go to one of the subviews and only look at one specific site or one specific region, which elements or services or SLAs are in that specific site or region. Now, before I dive into more detail on that element list, I do also want to briefly mention some of the remaining pages that are still not touched upon yet. Some of them are mentioned in here as well, the reports, the dashboards, the aggregation, the histogram, and the trending. Let's take a look at that in a short demo. So let's open up our root view on our dcpdma.skyline.be. And you will find a visual, of course, as we always have when opening a card. And we have for a view card below this view. And what is in a view? Well, basically we have in a view elements, services, SLAs, they are all listed in here. I do, of course, have the possibility to go to a specific site or a specific region, or my operations, which is indicated with a world map on the visual. And what is in there? That's a subset of all the devices I have, or all the elements I have in my DataMiner system, because I still have some in other views as well. Now, next to that, we always have also the alarms page in there. We've mentioned already we have already touched upon the alarm console at the bottom of your DataMiner system. Well, actually, every card in the DataMiner system also includes immediately a page with all the alarms concerning this object. In this case, it is concerning the operations. If I would go to Belgium, for instance, it will show me only the alarms that are in Belgium. So that is helping you to quickly look at the alarms of that specific view. Let me also maybe open up an element like my DMA info in a new card. We have the same thing there. So we do have, of course, the visuals for our element. We have all the data pages with all the metrics coming back, all the parameters from the device. And we do also have the alarms on that specific element. Apparently my element, my server here has a lot of alarms. Okay. So let's go back to my view, my operations view. So before diving into the list of the elements, we do have some other pages below there. Note if you collapse the side panel, you do have the visual, the below this view, and the alarms always available, but not all of the sub pages are available. So therefore you have to open it up and then you might see some more details there. So if I open up the side panel, and let's have a quick look at the reports. So the reports contain immediately some nice reports on the view I'm currently looking at. So within my operations, I had in the last 24 hours per hour around 15 alarms, you could say, or 50 to 20 alarms per hour. And apparently the element that is generating most of the alarms is indicated here. 2 of them are generating actually nearly 200 alarms of that, 200 alarms. Next to that, we have also the alarm states. The alarm state, that's a little bit different because the alarm state actually is about not the number of alarms, but it is about how much time it has been an alarm. So you can see that this IRD02 has been 100% of the time in critical state all the time. So although my servers here are generating a lot of alarms, they are not in the top of the worst alarms, you could say. Underneath that, I immediately have a heat map on all the elements in my view that I'm currently looking at, the operations, and it shows me a last 24-hour timeline of how the alarm has evolved on those specific elements in there. You have some more details in there. Dashboards is something we will cover in one of the next modules there, or videos. I'll come back to that. What is aggregation? Well, aggregation is a special thing where we are not specifically looking at metrics of one element, but we are combining the metrics of a whole series of elements together into an average or a min or a max, something like that, bubble it up into the tree structure. So instead of looking at individual, let's say, servers and taking a look at the CPU load of all those different servers, no, I want to know what the average CPU load is of all my servers in a specific site. I do have an example of that on the demo DMA here, demo.skyline.be. Let's open up this view here and let's take a look at the aggregation, because here I have some rules which are active, and I do have in my server farm an average load which is already indicated there, and that actually allows me to take a look at the average load in the different sites I have. So I can see I'm running at around 20% CPU utilization across my 3 different continents. If I dive into Europe, I can see I have 2 sites, Amsterdam and Brussels. They are about 14-15%, so I can really drill down into a specific view or site or region to see where the load is increasing, and that's the average of all my servers I have in there. So that is what aggregation is about. It's taking individual metrics of the elements and aggregating that with an average up to my tree structure. And that's where I can effectively generate an alarm and have trending available on Brussels. So it is perfectly possible. I'm generating an alarm on Brussels because the average load is getting too high, while all the servers in Brussels are actually not generating any alarms. They are perfectly okay, but since they are running a little bit high and the average is reaching a certain threshold, I'm able to generate alarming on a view. Remember from the cube sidebar, there was an icon I can show on the views, a small triangle that is indicating these kind of alarms separately in the aggregation. How to create aggregation rules, that's something we will cover in the correlation video. I just briefly want to mention it over here. Okay, so that's the aggregation. What's the histogram? The histogram allows you to take a certain value across different elements and put it in a histogram. Let me show you with a quick example. So I need to select a specific type of device or protocol. So if I select something that I have a lot of them in my DataMiner system, a Philips test protocol, and I need to select a parameter from there. Let's go for the output gain, and I can load the histogram. What it basically does, it shows me that how many of my Philips devices or elements are effectively configured with the output gain on 0. So here I can see I have 4 of my elements that are configured on 0. If you want to know which ones, you can actually right click on it and see the elements in here and immediately go to it as well. Most of them are apparently at 18, so if I move my mouse on the upper right hand side, you can see the interval 18 dBm. I have 17 elements that are configured on 18. Again, I can take a look at them in my right-click menu. And some of them are also on 21, 2 of them more specifically. So that is a histogram. So if you want to see, for instance, the average load of the CPU across your different servers, you can do so by populating this with the correct driver of your choice. The trending allows you to take a look at multiple trend graphs, but you're not selecting elements, you're selecting type of element, basically a driver. So again, a little bit similar as histogram. Here, first of all, I need to add a parameter, but I need to again select one of my drivers. So let's go for the Microsoft platform, and then production version is fine. And then I go, for instance, for the total processor loads. And you will see that in this view, I have 2 elements. So if I show the trend, I will have 2 graphs. Maybe it's not that visible because they are pulling the same device. So it's basically in line on top of each other, but you can see a little bit of jitter on it. So that's how you can effectively take a very quick trend graph of a whole series of elements by just specifying that's the type of element, that's the parameter I want, and it will load all of them within that specific view. If I would go to another view, it would have more or less or maybe other elements in there depending on which ones are in that selected view. Nodes we already saw before, so you can add nodes on a view as well, and you can also add a annotation on a view. So that was a quick view on that, those other pages. Maybe quickly also for the element. So we saw the visual, the data, the alarms. So also here we have the reports available. So if you want to take a closer look on how this specific device did in the last 24 hours, last week, month to date. So you can see that this one generated around 6 to 10 alarms for the last 24 hours per hour. So we have like 151 alarms minor and 44 warning alarms. And it was basically all the time in a minor state. That's also the timeline, which I can also expand to see it on all the different parameters or different individual parameters in your elements. So also the nodes annotations, we already saw those. I just briefly wanted to show you that reports page on an element as well. Okay, so let's go back to our element list. That's something I want to take a quick look at. So this list allows you to have a quick overview of all your elements that are configured in the DataMiner system you have. Of course, you need to open up the root view to see all of them. If you open up a specific site or region, it will only list the elements that are in there. Just briefly, the columns that we have in there. So we have, of course, the name of the element or service or SLA, depending on the type of object you're looking at. It also indicates immediately the alarm state. So in this case, it's critical and there is 1 alarm. So it also adds a count with the number of alarms to give you an indication of how many alarms this element has. We also have the state of the element that is indicated, active, paused, stopped, the polling IP and port information, so which IP address we're currently polling. There is some more information, typically more for serial, like a bus address, but also a timeout is indicated there, a command timeout and an element timeout, the slow poll and retries that are available. We also have the protocol and the protocol version that is immediately indicated. So the driver basically that is being used for this specific element. Combined with the alarm and trend template that is indicated, the alarming and the trending. The type of protocol is something that is specified inside the driver. For instance, in this case, it concerns UPS devices. Next to that, we have the host ID and first of all, the element ID. So that's the unique identifier of the element. That's the unique reference. So if we change the name of an element, that doesn't really matter. We have that unique ID reference there that is always going to make sure that you can easily change the name of an element. It is being hosted on a specific DataMiner agent that is indicated with the host ID and the name of the DataMiner agent doing the polling of that specific data source. The type of element as it is defined in the driver, the protocol type that I mentioned before, that's more like a serial or SNMP, and we also have the type of element, that's the UPS. The virtual IP, if that would be configured, it is possible to assign a virtual IP to an element so that we can convert it northbound to a virtual SNMP agent if that would be configured. A description we can add to an element, and we also have the impacted services, so in which services this element is included, and it is potentially also attached to a certain SLA or service level agreement. And if you have additional user definable properties like a gold, silver, bronze, that will also be indicated with additional columns that will be added in there. Let's take a look at that. I do believe I have some properties there, let me add my BERT class. So you can right click on the headers to add and remove columns. So I have my BERT class, and I can see I have a gold device here. That was one of my IRD 1 or 2 or DMA info. So you can see the gold that I specified and displayed in the surveyor tree structure here. You can also display that so that you can also easily filter on that, of course, and only have, for instance, the gold alarms in there, or the gold elements, I should say. Okay, so you can easily extend those columns with the items that you find meaningful, of course. So that's a little word on the columns that we have available. So the element state, active, paused, stopped. I've briefly mentioned that in the introduction. So an element that is hosted in a DataMiner agent. So we have 3 of them, element 1, 2, and 3. If it's active, it is effectively polling the data source, the effective physical element or physical data source somewhere in my network. So it's retrieving that information and it's making it available in the DataMiner, in my web browser, you could say. If I pause it, it basically pauses the data collection just for a brief moment, you could say, because everything is still kept in memory. The latest polled parameter values are still available. So everything is still ready to kick in again. But if you stop it, it really takes everything away from memory and it's completely out of the DataMiner internal guts, you could say, but it can easily be started again as well. Of course, all the configuration is still stored on disk, so you don't lose anything, of course, like the history alarms and things like that. So stopping is typically for a longer period of time. Pausing is typically if you need to do quick rewiring and you want to avoid that a timeout would happen. You pause the element for a few minutes, you do the rewiring, you activate it again, and nobody had to worry about a timeout alarm. But typically the active is the default state, you could say, of course. The icons I can expect in my element list, first of all, the element icons, that's like a little cube. If it doesn't mention anything, the cube, like the middle icon here that I'm indicating, that means that the communication is okay, but we don't show any color coding on there because there are no alarm thresholds defined. You didn't define when the element is okay or not okay, so you didn't put thresholds on things like CPU load or bitrate or signal level. As soon as you activate alarming, we can say, okay, the device is normal, warning, minor, major, or critical. The most severe alarm state will be shown. If there would be a communication problem that we are not able to communicate with the data source, it would indicate the orange cross. And the pause and stop sign are also indicated here. If you pause your element or stop it, that's nicely indicated as well. And the last one is the masked color indication that is by default purple. Of course, the colors can be changed on a DataMiner system, so that would be different than if you would do so. But those are the default ones. Next to the element icon, we have still two element icons indicated here. We do also have a redundancy group icon. So those are two, you could say, main devices with a backup standing by. So 3 element icons. So that represents a redundancy group. A service, that's basically 2 element cubes interconnected, you could say, or they are working together to deliver a service in your network. So that's a service icon. A service icon could also have color coding, of course, like the last icon there. And if there are like 3 lines in the upper left hand side, that would indicate that this is an SLA and basically a contract attached to a service. So an SLA is a contract tracking the availability of your service. That's the icon for an SLA. So those icons are also going to pop up in that list of elements, services, and SLAs. The quick filter, as I already quickly showed you, you can quickly type any of the keywords. So if you're looking, for instance, for a specific thing that contains that is contained in the name. It will also immediately give you some auto suggestions. You might be looking for your DMA info element. Yep, that's true. Thanks for helping out. You can clear that again, and you could also be looking, for instance, for your Microsoft element. So it's helping out, immediately giving me, oh, Microsoft platform. Yep, I'm looking for my 2 Microsoft servers that I have in this demo system. Or you could also, of course, search on critical. Then I would immediately have all the critical alarms or critical elements in my DataMiner system. So that comes in quite handy to quickly filter on something. It gives you the auto suggestions. So again, double quotes can be used for the exact searching. And you notice again, the blue background is popping up again while filtering to make sure that it is visually clear that you are looking at a subset, at a filtered list of elements and not all of them. At the bottom right-hand side, we do have a couple of icons there. The first icon that I want to mention is the filter icon. That allows you to decide which kind of objects you effectively want to see in there. Because let's take a look at my list of elements. So first of all, on the left-hand side, in the sidebar or side panel, we can already decide if we want to have all the objects or only the elements in there or only the services. So I can see I have 5 services in my operations view, and I have 1 SLA in there, and I have apparently 2 redundancy groups. If I put all, it basically combines everything, and my services and SLAs are in here as well. Now, if I go to elements, I do see that I have 33 elements at the bottom. And if I click on the filter, you will see that actually hidden elements are not shown by default. So we've mentioned the hidden element is a little bit, hidden away. It's not shown in the surveyor, first of all, but also in this list of elements, it is not being shown unless you specifically activate to show those hidden elements. But also you could say like, yeah, I'm not interested in the paused and the stopped elements, and the redundancy elements are the ones with the curly braces. So those are pointer elements. So I'm only interested in the other elements. So actually I have 29 elements in my operations view that are real elements, you could say, that are active and not paused and stopped. You could also take a look at some paused. I don't have any, and I don't have any paused elements as well. So you can easily use that filter to quickly filter on certain types of also for services and SLAs, you do have some filtering options. If I go to all, the filter item will combine everything for services as well, for measurement points and redundancy groups. I didn't mention measurement points. That's something that comes out of a spectrum analyzer. So if a spectrum analyzer is combined with a switch, you can actually have measurement points on the different switch points. So yeah, one last thing there is the bottom option is all devices include subviews. By default, it shows you everything that is underneath, in this case, operations, but also operations has a lot of subviews. Everything underneath all the subviews is included. If I would deactivate this, it would only show me everything which is directly underneath operations, which is in this case nothing. But if I would go to Brussels, it would show me all the 5 devices or elements in there, but not the spare units, because the spare units are in a subview. So the subview is not being shown. If I activate the subview, include subviews, it will show it as well. Let me deactivate it. Then it only shows the 5 elements underneath Brussels. It was not activated. Okay. Next to that, we do have 2 viewing modes, you could say. The list view, as it is by default, and then a little bit the larger list items view, you could say. What's the difference? If I go, that's the list view with all the details. If I go for that one, it will basically give me a little bit a bigger item for every object, indicates since when it is an alarm, and it has some possibilities to sort with the tab pages on top. So here it shows me all of them in an alphabetical way, the most severe on top, the most recent in alarm, and the most popular. So if I would go for operations, or maybe just the root view, let's say, and just all of my elements, and I go to that list item view, the most popular element, that's apparently the IRD 1 and 2 and my DMA info. Those have been most frequently accessed by the users. So that's another view on it. Instead of using the detailed list view, you have more the list item view. Some more features in the right-click menu. We know the right-click menu by now. We've seen it on various places. It is always a little bit the same thing, where we can open up, of course, the object. We can change the state, active, paused, stopped, mask the element if it concerns an element. So depending if it's an element or a service, it will have different items in there, of course. Some editing, some more we will discover during administration section as well. Now, what I also want to mention is that the total is indicated nicely at the top there. So there you can see how many objects you have in that list. Remember, of course, the filter and the type filter is taken into account there as well. Now, to wrap it up is the last thing that I want to mention, the multiple set. The multiple set allows you to do a set across different elements. You might remember in the data pages, we already saw the possibility to do a multiple set inside one device, basically reconfiguring different parameters and then in one go push all those settings to the element. That's a multiple set inside an element. Here we are looking at a multiple set across different elements. You can launch that by right-clicking on any of the elements and going to multiple sets, but it depends on, it's important which one you right-click, because that will automatically populate the multiple set window with the protocol and the version that you right-clicked upon. So if you right-click on a Microsoft server, it will immediately select a Microsoft server. If you right-click on a Cisco switch, it will immediately go into the Cisco switch driver. You will see on the right-hand side then immediately all the elements that are using this driver, that are this specific element type, you could say. And I have the possibility to select a parameter from that driver. And I will, as soon as I select the parameter, see the current value on all those devices. And I can see like, okay, this is all on 18. Let's maybe check on my system if that's the case as well, or if we need to fix something. So I'll right-click on any of the IRDs that I have there and go to the multiple set over there. Multiple set. So it immediately selects the driver that is being used for this type of device, shows me all of the different elements that I have in my DataMiner system using this driver. And let's go for a parameter like the output gain. As soon as I select the output gain, you can see that it fills in the value for the different elements I have. Some of them are not on green. Let's maybe select the ones here that are on 18. So you need to select some of them, or you can go for all or none, or if you select some of them, you can invert the selection as well. I'll go and just manually select some of them, like the ones that are in critical state on 18 here. And I want to fix them, and I want to immediately change all of them to a new, more correct value, like for instance 12. And if I click on the set, it will immediately push the new value to those selected elements in there. So you simply select a new value of the selected parameter. You make sure that you make your selection of elements, you push set, and it immediately does the configuration on those selected elements. Handy tool to do bulk setting on a bunch of devices. So that was a little bit about the data pages, where we saw a list of all the elements, not only the elements, but also the services and SLAs were included in there. And we wrapped it up with the multiple set. We saw also some other pages. So basically that concludes most of the important pages we had to cover in the DataMiner Cube interface. Next coming up is some other pages or some other tools like Alerter and the dashboards, reports, websites that are available outside of Cube. I hope you enjoyed it. Let's go to the next one.